Hey guys, I thought I'd record a video about different strategies in War Chest. So these are strategies that you can use with specific units or different combinations of units. And these are things that work for me or that I've seen other players use, and I thought I'd just share it for your benefit. Okay, so I like to call this strategy the coinless herald. And the idea here is that instead of maneuvering the herald using herald coins, you use the decrees, because the herald's ability is that every time you proclaim a decree, you can then maneuver the herald. Now this strategy works best when combined with the Earl, because every time the Earl controls a base, it can activate a decree, which then activates the Herald. So in addition to activating decrees with the Roll a Coin, you can also do it with the Herald. So you get a lot of movement pretty much for free. So I'm going to fast forward a bit, and we see that the Earl is going toward this base right here. Okay, now you'll notice that the herald was bolstered, so that means there are no more heralds in the supply. For most units, this would mean that you won't be able to move that unit on the board, but for the herald, we have this alternative way of maneuvering it. So now the Earl is going for the base. And now you'll notice that Noah activated the enlist decree, and he's going to recruit, he recruits a Lancer and another Earl. Now, because he used the enlist decree, that means he can now move the Herald for free. The Herald moves forward. Okay, now the Earl controls the base, which lets him activate a decree. So he activates the redeploy decree, and he redeploys the Earl here. And he can then maneuver the Herald again. So as you can see, you're getting a lot of movement, a lot of units, like both the Herald and Earl are moving on the board, and it's very efficient because look how small the bag is. It's just Earls and Lancers. Okay, so as we can see, so the Earl was killed here. Then we have the Lancer control this point. And now Noah is activating the redeploy decree. He moved the Herald onto this point, and he's gonna kill this warrior priest, which this was an excellent play. Okay, this Lancer is gonna control this point, and the Earl is gonna control this one. So as you can see, this is a very fast-paced strategy. I mean, the entire game was 63 moves, which is a pretty short game. And yeah, the strategy works really well, and it's very hard to counter because of how fast it is. And I think I was trying to use a small bag warrior priest strategy, but that's a very slow one to build up. So yeah, I just didn't make it in time. This is called the Mercenary Rush. And the idea is to capture one of these two forward bases with the mercenary early in the game and before your opponent does. If playing with the Siege expansion, I'll usually go for the fortified base because it'll provide the mercenary with some extra protection. And it's a pretty straightforward strategy. So you just need to deploy the mercenary and then start recruiting mercenaries in order to move them and get to the base. So as you can see, I recruit a mercenary, move it. My opponent then spies on me, removes a royal guard from my hand in order to delay me from getting to this base. I deploy a siege tower. I then recruit another mercenary and advance it. I move the mercenary again. Now I'm on the point. I then control the base. And then I have to just worry about these three bases. So my mercenary moves back, moves again, and captures the point. The siege tower then moves here in order to prevent the knight from capturing this base. And then the mercenary starts advancing in order to capture the this base. Here we go. Moves forward and eventually gets on the point and captures it. I'll show you a couple of variants of this strategy. Here we have a variant where I bolster the mercenary. And the reason I do that is because my opponent has the crossbowmen and the cavalry. So if your opponent has units that have range, that means before you can move your mercenary forward safely, you want to bolster the mercenary to make sure he's a little more protected. So I'm going to move it forward. I got a scout on the point, then I bolster the mercenary. Okay, and then I'm going to use, I'm going to recruit a mercenary, recruit another mercenary. Now that I'm on the point, I know I'm pretty much guaranteed to capture it. Even if the cavalry attacks me or the crossbowman somehow attacks me, I'll still be able to capture this point. Then I'm going to move these two guys, the lancer and the siege tower, onto their points. And I'm just gonna delay basically until I can capture these bases. I'm just gonna let my opponent kill all of my mercenaries. Okay, and capture the siege tower, and then claim the initiative, capture the last base, and that's it. And my last and maybe favorite variant of the Mercenary Rush is combining it with the Ensign. So if you combine it with the Ensign, that means you can maneuver your mercenary once without recruiting a mercenary. So in this case, I'm going to deploy a mercenary onto the point. I then use the royal coin to recruit a mercenary and move it. I deploy an ensign, and then I use the ensign to move the mercenary once toward this base. And I still have one mercenary coin here and two in the supply. Bolster the mercenary. And now I have a bolstered mercenary on a control point with a fort. And there's nothing my opponent can do, right? So I can kill the knight, kill the archer, and control the base. And then later I can move the mercenary back and capture one of these bases which are uncontested. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I called this strategy the Herald and Siege Tower strategy. Not a very original name, I'll give you that. And the idea here is that you, at the start of the game, when you deploy the siege tower, you get to bolster it for free. But if you redeploy it, you then get to bolster it a second time. The only caveat about this strategy is that it is dependent on the order in which you draw your coins. In this game, I got all the coins I needed in the right order, so it kind of worked out. So what I did here is I deployed the siege tower, bolstered it for free. Then I am going to deploy the Herald here, and you need to make sure the Herald is on the board before you then activate the redeploy decree. So as you can see, we have redeploy. I'm then going to redeploy the siege tower, bolster it again for free, and then I get to move the Herald as a result of using the decree. Move the siege tower, so now I have a triple bolstered siege tower that is quite formidable, you know, to have on the board, and I can play it very aggressively. Right? I can move it forward. It's triple bolstered early on, so no one's gonna mess with it. Okay, Herald's on the point, bolstering the pikemen, moving the siege tower forward. Then I activate the March decree to move the siege tower, which lets me control this point, and I have a triple bolstered siege tower. We can either try chipping away the archer, even though it's protected by the war wagon, or I can go for the marshal. So as you can see, the archer retreats, which means the marshal is left unprotected. And then there's not much my opponent can do against the siege tower now. It's on the point, so I'm pretty much guaranteed to win this. And that's it. This next strategy, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with because you've probably lost to it many times. I know I have. It's called the Warrior Priest's Small Bag. And the idea here is to have a bag that consists of only Warrior Priest coins and the Royal coin. And this way, every time you use the Warrior Priest to attack or control a point, you trigger the Warrior Priest's special ability, which is to draw a coin from the bag. But because you only have Warrior Priests in the bag, it means you get to do infinite actions. Now, I'm gonna treat you to something quite special. This is the first game where that I know of where the Warrior Priest strategy was used. So this is the game that started it all, and I feel like since this game came to light, it really changed the way people looked at the Warrior Priest. So let's have a look at the guy who started it all. So we see that HFGLS has the Warrior Priest, and he's going up against Chen from CDC. Now, the idea with the Warrior Priest small bag is that you want to bolster off all of your other units, right? So we have the Warrior Priest on one end, all the other units on the other end. Doesn't really matter where they are as long as they're bolstered away. Then we have Ensign being bolstered, Warrior Priest moves, Footman being bolstered, Marshal bolstered, and now all we have is a bolstered Warrior Priest and 3 coins in circulation, which are 2 Warrior Priest coins and 1 Royal coin. And now you'll see that this Warrior Priest moved toward the crossbowman. It's going to control a point and then eliminate the crossbowman. Then it moves because it attacked, so it has another action. And then the cavalry attacks the Warrior Priest. Warrior Priest attacks again, moves again. Then it's going to control a point, move again, and then it's going to control the last point. I'm sorry, not yet. Now it's going to control the last point. So it takes a bit of time to build up this strategy. So it's a bit of a slow start, but once you get this engine going, it is very difficult to counter. Yeah, so this is the first game where this strategy was used that I'm aware of. I'll show you one of my games where I used this strategy. So I'm going to deploy my units on the board. I'm going to start bolstering them. So I have my Warrior Priest deployed. And I just bolstered the Siege Tower. And I bolstered the Warrior Priest. So usually when you play a small bag Warrior Priest, you want to make sure your Warrior Priest is bolstered. And move the Warrior Priest forward. Use the Marshal to trigger the Warrior Priest to attack the Earl and the fort. Okay. So now all of my units are bolstered, which means that all I have in my bag are these 3 coins. Now I'm going to move here. My Warrior Priest took a hit, but now that I have a small bag, what will happen is I'm going to attack the Earl. Then I need to draw a coin, but the only coin I had is this Warrior Priest, so it goes back in the bag, and then I draw it immediately. And then I use it again to attack the crossbowman, and the same thing happens again. And then I move on to the point. I use the Reinforced Decree to get my eliminated Warrior Priest back. And I'm gonna recruit it, bolster my Warrior Priest again, control the point and move forward. Yeah, and here I'm gonna lose another Warrior Priest to the pikemen, move on to the point, and toward the end of the game, you can also start recruiting some other units to capture those back bases that you sort of left uncontrolled, and there we go. Now I also want to show you some counters to the Warrior Priest. So one of the best counters is the cavalry, but it also depends on the initiative. So in this game, I have a Warrior Priest, and I'm gonna try play the small bag strategy. My opponent has a cavalry. Now you'll notice that I have the initiative. This is crucial because in order to use the cavalry to counter the Warrior Priest, you need to be able to claim the initiative. So again, I start bolstering my units off, right? And you'll notice that my opponent, at this point, he claims the initiative, right? So I have my Warrior Priest here. My opponent has their cavalry here. He then claims the initiative. Okay. I then move the Warrior Priest forward with my Ensign. My opponent moves on to the point here. But instead of controlling the point, what my opponent does is they attack the Warrior Priest. And then because they claim the initiative, it means they go again, and then they kill the Warrior Priest. Right? So that's what I call the Cavalry Double-Tap. Which is when you use your last cavalry coin to attack a unit, and then because you claim the initiative, you get to go again, so you finish them off. That's one counter. Other potential counters to the Warrior Priest small bag are the Bannerman, which can push the Warrior Priest around, prevent it from controlling bases and getting too close. The Berserker can be a good counter, so if you bolster up your Berserker, you can then maneuver it to get close to the Warrior Priest and kill it off. The Pikeman is a good counter because if the Warrior Priest attacks the Pikeman, it then loses coins, so it negates the infinite actions loop. The range units can be useful, so if the crossbowman, it can sort of shoot the Warrior Priest from far away. The Lancer can maybe attack the Warrior Priest from far away. And yeah, I'm sure there's other good counters as well. So this next strategy is about using the Earl and the Scout together. The Earl is a fast unit because when you deploy it, you can then move it off the base, and the Scout is also a fast unit because it lets you capture a base early in the game. So in this case, I deploy the Siege Tower, move it off the point, deploy a War Wagon, and then I deploy the Earl. And the Earl is already on a base, and then I deploy the Scout on a base as well. Now, this works best when you have the Redeploy decree, because then you can redeploy the Scout using either your Royal Coin, or when you capture a base with the Earl, you can then redeploy the Scout. So I then capture a point with the Scout, and I then redeploy it onto this point. So this was just the first round. This was like the first cycle of coins. And already I have a base and 2 units on other bases. Then I, let's see, so I capture, yeah, so I moved the Siege Tower onto the point to sort of prevent my opponent from taking this base. Recruited another Earl. Control the base with the Earl, and then I'm going to activate the redeploy decree, move on to here, Luckily, my opponent didn't have a bishop. Otherwise, they would have moved onto the fort. And then using the Earl, I move onto the fort. And I capture the last base. So this entire game only took 42 moves. And it's just a very, very fast strategy. It's quite hard to counter. And yeah, it's very, very useful. Show you a variant of the Earl plus Scout combo, which I call the cheeky Earl Scout, which is instead of going for one of the bases close to you, you actually go for one of the bases closer to your opponent's home bases. So the way this works is you deploy your Earl, and then you use your second Earl coin to get close to the fort, and then you deploy the Scout onto the fort. And what it does is it lets you capture a forward base early in the game, and it's on a fort, so that's quite a good base to capture. And then it's just a matter of getting the other bases. But yeah, the main point is that early on in the game, you can use the Earl and Scout to capture a forward base. Just like the cheeky Earl and Scout, we have the cheeky Light Cavalry and Scout. So it works in a similar way, where we use the Light Cavalry to deploy the Scout on our opponent's one of our opponent's forward bases. So here I move the Light Cavalry forward, then I deploy the Scout there, control a base. The Light Cavalry then goes to the fortified control point, captures that, archer on the point, Light Cavalry going back again, captures that, and that was the and then the archer captures the last point. Yeah, I think this might be one of my fastest wins, just 38 moves, so it's a very effective strategy. Berserker is considered one of the strongest units in the game. It's a strong unit in its own right, but it's made even better when combined with other units. So I'll show you a few such examples. So the first example is going to be the Berserker with the War Wagon. The War Wagon lets you push other units, and in the case of the Berserker, if the War Wagon were to push it, then it would trigger the Berserker's ability. So what we have here is we have a Berserker deployed on the point, then moved off the point, and a War Wagon deployed next to it. War Wagon was bolstered, because it has to be bolstered in order to use its tactic ability. And in the meantime, we have the Light Cavalry sort of going around the board capturing bases. Okay, so yeah, we can see the Berserker is getting bolstered again and again. So now we have a 4-stack, and you'll notice that my opponent doesn't actually have any Berserkers in the bag, right? All of the Berserkers are on the board, but they're going to recruit another Berserker. So, and now we have actually a stack of 5 Berserkers, right? So the way they can maneuver it, they could use the March decree to move the Berserker and maneuver it, but they could also use the War Wagon. So we'll see that now all the opponent has is just 2 War Wagons and a roll of coin. They bolstered everything else. Okay, now they move the Berserker once, passed, and then they passed again, and then they move the Berserker again, and again. And as long as the Berserker is next to the War Wagon, it's protected, right? Even if the Berserker were attacked, the War Wagon could absorb the damage. Okay, and again, you can see how the the Berserker is always bolstered, and the War Wagon is the one that's sort of pushing it. And that's it. So that's a really strong combo. I'll show you another combination, which is a bit more traditional. That's the Ensign and the Berserker. It's the same principle. You just bolster your Berserker and then you use the Ensign to move your Berserker. So I'll just skip ahead a bit. And we see that the Berserker is being bolstered. And the Ensign is always kept close to the Berserker. So again, we have all 3 Berserkers on the board and 2 in the supply. So there's no, my opponent doesn't have any Berserkers in their bag. Okay. We have a 4 stack. Okay, a 5 stack. And now the Ensign was used to move the 5 stack. Kill the knight, move on to the point, and capture the point. Okay, so this Ensign is about to be eliminated, but it will be redeployed next to the Berserker. And again, we have a 5 stack, which is very powerful. And that the Ensign was used to move the Berserker and capture another base. There we go. And the last base, the Berserker can pretty much just take on its own. The very last strategy to do with the Berserker is combining the Berserker with the March decree. So here we have a Berserker, and it's a nobility game, and we have the March decree. And the way that works, it's a similar principle, but so you basically bolster your Berserker, and at the right moment, you basically use the March decree to move it. So right now, my opponent has a pikeman, a royal coin, and another coin in the bag. I think it's a bishop, and they're going to then use the Berserker here. They activate the March decree, you move the Berserker to do some damage, and yeah, basically capture some bases and eventually win the game, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they won the game. So those were a few creative ways of using the Berserker and making use of its full potential. Another interesting unit combination is the Bishop and Mercenary. The Mercenary's ability is that every time you recruit a Mercenary, you can maneuver the Mercenary. And the Bishop's ability is that every time you use the Bishop coin to recruit, you can then move or attack with the Bishop. So here we have a Bishop and Mercenary, and they are both deployed on the board. And then a royal coin is used to move the Mercenary. We then see a War Wagon deployed next to the Mercenary, and the Mercenary is bolstered. Then a Bishop coin is used to recruit a Mercenary. The Bishop is then moved, and the Mercenary is moved. So you're getting 2 actions for 1 coin. Mercenary moves on to the point, bolstered, and then again, we have the reinforced decree. So a Mercenary is returned to the supply, and then again a Mercenary is recruited. The Bishop is moved onto the point, and the Mercenary is then used to control the point. So as you can see, it's quite fast-paced, and they really work well together. There's like real synergy between these 2 units. So it's definitely something that's worth trying out, and I think it's just the War Wagon is just going to capture the last couple of bases, and that's it. The Bannerman is arguably one of the most frustrating units to play against. It keeps pushing your units out of the way, ruining your plans, and so on. And when you combine it with some other unit, it's even stronger, similar to how the Berserker is when combined with other units. So in this case, we have a Bannerman and a War Wagon being played together. So we have the War Wagon deployed on the board, the Bannerman next to it. Bannerman moves forward, and it looks like my opponent recruited all of their War Wagons. They bolster the War Wagon, then use it to push the Bannerman forward. So in addition to extra mobility, the Bannerman also has protection from the War Wagon. Then the War Wagon pushes the Bannerman, and then the Bannerman's ability triggers. It pushes the siege tower away. Bannerman then controls the point, is pushed forward again. Siege tower is moved again. Bannerman attacks the Lancer, moves on to the point using the War Wagon, captures the point, and then the War Wagon again repositions the Bannerman, and then they kind of each go their separate ways to capture the last couple of bases, and that's it. The Bannerman is also powerful when combined with the Ensign. So here we have an Ensign and Bannerman. The Bannerman is recruited, like both of the coins from the supply, then deployed on the board. The Ensign is deployed next to the Bannerman. The Bannerman then moves the light cavalry off the point, is bolstered, and moves onto this point. I'm going to skip ahead a little. Again, the Bannerman is sort of managing this whole area. And then the Ensign moves closer. And here we have the Ensign moving the Bannerman onto the point, and the Bannerman then pushes the Mercenary away. The Bannerman then moves forward, attacks the Mercenary, and so on. So in this particular case, it looks like the Bannerman did most of the work, but in principle, you could use the Ensign to sort of help the Bannerman out and give it a little more maneuverability. That's it. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you have any comments or questions, or if you want to share some of your own strategies, feel free to post in the comments, and I'll see you next time.